The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome Carol McGuire, representative from one ward that's going to be in a different ward as she runs again.
Yes, hello, Carl.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, and tell us what you've been in your 7th year.
14th, actually, 7 terms.
7th term, that's right.
I got involved and decided I liked it, so I'm sticking with it as long as the voters want to send me back.
Yeah, well, and you're also chair of which department?
Executive Departments and Administration. That's one of the busier and more important committees that does more stuff that nobody's ever heard of. We're
and it's a little complicated too.
Well, we deal with professional licensing, the organization of the state government, the state pension system, and the state building code.
Those are strong ones.
So, as I said, it's important and it affects a lot of people, but it's just not sexy anywhere.
No, but it is very important because it's you got to make sure that the right parts of the machine are working.
Yeah, you could, and of course we could spend a lot of money foolishly if we wanted to.
Well, I'm sure you looked over those every time.
Yeah, that was actually one of the better things we accomplished this year. There was a cost of living increase for people in the pension system, which is something we get now and then, but this one included an automatic cost of living increase every year forever, which is one of the delightful things that has made the Social Security system unsustainable. And so I spearheaded the effort, but the whole committee got behind me, and we eliminated that perpetual increase and just left the one-time cost of living increase. And that did pass and was modified by the Senate, but we did give everybody an extra check this year to
good.
all the lower paid retirees.
That is something when you have certain things like we're having right now with the increases of cost of gas, of food, of everything.
Well, the thing that really gets most retirees is increase in the cost of their prescription drugs and their medical insurance to pay for the drugs. And that's been going up much faster than general inflation. And it's not something you really want to cut. You can't really skimp on your insurance payments. No. And it's very bad for you if you decide not to fill your prescription because it's too expensive. You could develop other side effects pretty badly.
And the pensions are, that's the way it's handled are a little bit of a problem, aren't
well, it's expensive. The state made some very bad decisions in the early 90s and kept them up for almost 20 years. And by the time they realized they had fooled themselves for that long, the stock market fell apart in 2008. And so they, a couple of $1 billion. And we did in 2011 figure out how to change the pension system and pay for it. And we have been paying for it. We're on track. We will be finished in 2038. Yay, raw. Which is not as long as it seems, but it's long enough.
Yeah. So then it'll be balanced, right? Is that what you're saying?
It'll be close to balanced, and we will have paid off the previous debt.
Well, I know that here in Nashua, we may have a little unique. One department has its own pension system.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're doing darn well.
Well, they probably weren't foolish enough to follow what the state did in
I don't know
in
the
the
history,
90s.
but that's when I found out. I said, "So why haven't you changed the other wards? Because you're always complaining about what the state does to you, you know." And
It's very hard to get out of the pension system once you're in. You basically have to pay off your share of the unfunded liability from the 90s, and that's enormous. Right now, when the city pays for their employees, better than 3/4 of the payment, in some cases 90% of the payment, is to pay the arrearage, and only a little bit is to pay the pension they earned this year. So if we can finally get that,
yeah,
the history over with, it'll be a lot cheaper to stay in the pension system.
is that is you thinking about anything like some like the industrial companies give pensions?
Very
Go
few
into
of them
that?
give the kind of pensions that we do. We have a defined benefit pension, which sounds really good because you know what you're going to get. It's based on how long you've served and what your final pay is. But there's no cost of living increases, which is, after a few years, starts getting to be a pain. If you go with the more modern type of retirement system, which is you know how much you put in each year and it grows and you can spend it how you wish, you can arrange for a cost of living increase. But you've got to be responsible for yourself to a large degree.
Well, what other programs were you really interested in and feel that you accomplished something as chair?
Well, one thing we had was the governor's emergency powers, which a lot of people were upset in last year because the definition of what's an essential business got everybody upset because we all have different ideas of what's important and what's essential. And also the fact that the governor said, well, if we're getting federal emergency aid, I can figure out how to spend it. I don't need the legislature to tell me what to do. And as the law was written, he was absolutely correct. He didn't have to. They took him to court and said, yes, you don't have to do that. So last year we worked on it. We got a fairly substantial compromise, and we put it in the budget, and it passed. And so now there's some fixes, but we didn't get it all in the budget. So we worked on it again this year. That was House Bill 275, and it passed the House fairly non-controversially. It passed the Senate, and then the governor decided to veto it for some reason. So I don't know what's going to happen in the veto session.
He hasn't told you? He hasn't given you
No,
that message?
because we hadn't talked to him about it because it was exactly the final compromise we'd worked out, and we thought would be in the budget, but it didn't quite make it. So this is just cleaning up the loose ends.
I see. Okay.
So we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, when do you vote on it?
Sometime before the general election. It's not my call.
That's not your call.
Well, if nothing else, we want to
his
wait
call.
till all of the bills have gotten to the governor.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been doing a lot of the more important ones, but there's a lot of little ones that he might look at and say, oh my goodness, you forgot this or that. Sometimes you have to agree with him that, so we didn't read this as carefully as we should have.
So there's still a little cleanup work to do.
It's a lot of work to get the bills, even after they've passed the legislature, get the language cleaned up and the references checked and over to the governor. So.
Well, did you have any other problems with some of the bills that you wanted to get through and didn't get through?
Oh, of course. The ones from my committee did pretty well. We were mostly concentrating on cleaning up the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, which is where we consolidated all the professional offices so that they would the boards could concentrate on their technical oversight and not on the administrative stuff that many of them had trouble doing, particularly doing efficiently and on schedule. So we've been tweaking a lot of the laws, because when we consolidated this office, we have more laws than we ought to in this state, and we had to go, for the last 3 years, we've been going around fixing where we had an old statute that didn't agree with the new one, or we had 2 different organizations that had the authority to set the fees, which of course never works out. There's a lot of cleanup, and I'm sure there's going to be more for another couple of years at least.
Oh, yeah. I remember when one of the results of the 2010 election was we had a group that wanted to relook at all those safety or whatever, because a lot of the penalties that they were using was they got into, they collected the fee instead of going to the...
there are a lot of statutes that are old or started as old, and they've been amended forever and ever. The driver's license statutes and the car registration, they're better than 100 years old and have been amended so many times that it's very hard to follow and figure out what applies to whom, and the rules aren't that much better. One of the things I accomplished was get a constituent to get farm plates, which he wanted. I don't know why, but he wanted them, and the law appeared to be that he qualified, and he was having trouble with the DMV to give it to him. So
that just let them get on the road with something that wouldn't normally be allowed, or what?
No, actually, I think it's the agricultural plates. You can only use them within 20 miles of your farm.
Oh, well, okay.
So it's restricted use, and the insurance is cheaper.
Okay.
But, in his case, he needed a vehicle to go to the dump and carry stuff to the farmer's market and stuff like that.
Yeah. A lot of things there are getting more logical. Are you finding a more receptive user? I mean, people are feeling better about the rules, and
some of them are. We updated the state building code this term, thank God. We've been fighting it since 11, I think it was. And we finally got up to the 18 codes, which is where we want to be. Because when the building code first comes out, there's inconsistencies and errors. So we let all the gung-ho early adopters figure those out, and we adopt the building code a couple of years later. So we did update it, and I'm working with the Building Code Review Board to make sure that we get the next one in smoothly. And we did establish that if you're designing a major project, once you get your plan set, you don't have to worry about them changing the building code. If you're building it to the 18 code, you get up to, I think it's a couple of months after the code is changed, and you can still use the old one.
Okay.
Which, the way they work is that some things are new materials that wouldn't matter. In other cases, they're updates.
Yeah.
And it can be disconcerting if you've used the older version.
Well, your planning and the planning time takes.
Yeah, if you've got a major project.
Yeah.
It could take quite a while.
Yeah. Well, I know I have a neighbor who works with people who are trying to get licenses, some medical positions.
Oh, okay.
And she says it's getting better.
I hope so. We're struggling to make it simpler and more efficient, to make sure that we don't have silly requirements, and also working with the state police to get the criminal background checks faster. Most of the medical professions and a lot of the others that you might not think need it are required to have criminal background checks frequently.
Frequently? Oh, I see. That's,
Yeah, that was one of my surprise bills this year. It turns out that an occupational therapist who's working in the schools needs to have a separate criminal background check for each school,
oh,
which may not be a problem in Nashua because they're all under the same school board and the same school district. But where I am, you might be working in Northwood on Monday and Pittsfield on Tuesday and Barnstead on
really?
Wednesday. Well, they're right next to each other, but they're in 3 different SAUs and in 3 different counties. So if you need to get 3 separate criminal background checks, that's, in my mind, a lot of wasted effort and
yeah,
money.
sure.
For everybody. So I put in a bill to look at centralizing it somehow. And that is actually been approved and been signed by the governor.
Oh,
and
good.
so we're going to look
Yeah,
into
something
that.
like that is logical. I mean, it's just what you're thinking. You know?
Yeah, well, each school might have slightly different standards. There are some things that state law says that if you are convicted of things, you can't ever work in a school. I believe child rape is one of them, for example. But there are others that the school makes its own decision on.
Oh,
Or they could make their own decision on, and that means that you need a separate check because we get most of these from the federal government through the FBI,
yeah.
and they forbid us to share that information.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
they're not being logical then.
Well, they probably aren't thinking of the fact that an occupational therapist might only have to work 1 day a week at a
Yeah.
specific school,
Sure.
and she goes to 5 of them.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, I hope that people are starting to think a little bit more logical instead of possessive on the information.
I wouldn't bet on it. The people aren't necessarily possessive. It's a matter of protecting the privacy of the person
Information.
being investigated.
Yeah.
And I would think that their permission might be all you need, but that's not the case.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you think, or what are you saying you're going to be looking out for in the coming years if you get elected?
More of the same. Cleaning up, keeping the pension system under control, not spending any more, being more efficient with the state government, working on building codes. I've discovered a marvelous working group because we have the question of grease traps for restaurants with sewer systems came up. A friend of mine in the legislature had a constituent who had a little clam shack about the size of this stage, and he had to put in 1,000-gallon grease trap because he has a septic system.
Yeah.
And that made no sense to anybody because the trap was bigger than his restaurant.
Right.
So we're looking into that as a question of how do you integrate all the different requirements we have. And it turns out they've had one meeting of the working group with environmental services and the building code board and Health and Human Services, which inspects restaurants, and a few other people talking about, how do we be sensible about this? What are the real requirements? And that's drilling down to the real requirements is one of the problems we have, because so many people try to write it so that it's perfect for them, and that doesn't always work for everybody else.
You got to get a few opinions in there and try to even it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's just like the schools. That's one of the things I've been working on. I'm not pushing it this year because we got education freedom accounts into the budget and they passed and they're working. But there's just no school that's going to be the right school for every single child in the district.
Right.
So parents should have the right and the ability to pick a better school for their children. And some of them need it, and some of them just do better in different types of schools.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I kind of feel that way too. things that your children have in school. I mean, even if you have several children, they're individuals and they could be different.
I remember the time when I was going for my MBA, and one of my brothers and one of my sisters were also going for an MBA at the same time in totally different schools. And it turned out that none of us were taking anything in common. We all had different focus. We all had different interests.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was funny. I worked on decision analysis and project management, and Stephen was in human relations. And when I showed him one of my papers, he just shivered and said, "No way, no way."
You know, that's interesting. I have 4 children, and while they went to 4 different schools, and they are 4 different areas.
Yeah. Well, this one was particularly amusing because it was, at the same degree, but it wasn't going to be the same by any means.
No, I kind of wondered why none of my children wanted to do the same thing as somebody else. None of them are in my field at all.
Well, that I'm familiar with.
But it's interesting to see how they grow up, and I think school choice is really a key in my mind. Each one of them, well, 2 of them went to the same school, but they were in different departments.
Exactly. It's like I said, even in the same departments, you're not going to necessarily study the same things or do the same things afterwards.
So are you seeing an advancement in the way you've spent, you're going to be spending your 8th term when you're elected, and have you seen a change in the operation in general? And
it's hard to say. COVID upended everything.
That's true, yeah.
In 2020, I remember that in March, we stayed until 4 o'clock one morning because we wanted to get through everything, and it was good because we didn't get together for another 6 weeks, and because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so we did at least have something under control. Last year, we met mostly remotely or hybrid while we were in committee. And that was really difficult to manage and very poor interaction among people. This year we were back in person and it was a lot more useful.
Has anything changed in your method of communicating with the voters?
Well, I don't write as many letters to the editor because the newspaper went out of business. Sorry, not my fault, but I try. I still write a weekly newsletter that I send out by email to any of my constituents that's interested and other people that are interested.
Yeah.
It sometimes shows up on Granite Grok as the detail, and it's got all the information on what I've been doing and a lot of the reasoning behind my votes and what I'm doing. So.
Well, if any time you want to do that in the future, let me know. We can do another one of these.
Okay. Well, I'll be glad to.
And then you can mail out.
Send me your email, and I'll be glad to put you on the list.
Okay.
Although I did one in the middle of June that had all the bills I submitted this year. What happened to them?
No, I mean this kind of an interview.
Okay. Well,
okay. If you want, I mean, if you feel that you want to get your message out more
thank
directly,
you, Carl. I really appreciate that. That
would
would be very useful.
My pleasure to be able to interview you here, and you can use it in your distribution.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. And do you think that in general there are any other areas that are from you're communicating with all of the different departments, and have you seen improvements in some in their communication with their voters?
Not.
Still more to go.
There's still a way to go,
okay.
And the Department of Motor Vehicles, which most people have dealings with, they only really talk to them when they have a problem.
Oh.
If your registration sails through, you go to the town hall, pay your money, and there you are, no problem.
Right.
It's when you have problems that you have to deal with them. a lot of the people on the front lines aren't necessarily good with dealing with problems.
That's unfortunate. Is that some way of getting some kind of plans set up so that these people are trained a little bit better in that area?
The one thing that I did was that I wrote a letter to the commissioner and pointed out that, you know, one of my constituents wasn't able to get a handicap plate for his motorcycle because he had one on his van and there's a limit of one. Well, you try hanging a placard on a motorcycle, it's not going to do you much good. So I went and wrote to the commissioner and said, you've got a problem here. And he wrote very nicely, wrote back and said, you're right, this is wrong. I've retrained all the front desk people and and my constituent got his plate very quickly after that. So.
Oh, that's good. Well, I noticed too when I was in my second year that a lot of the one-person businesses were having problems with some of these.
That we've been working on for a long time is to make it simpler.
Yeah.
I haven't heard recently how much it's improved, but I believe it has.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think it's hard, and a lot of people that we have there are not trained in general. You know, they come from all different situations, but they all looking to get service.
That's part of the issue is that the people who are dealing with are based on the average,
right?
The normal, and so the average and normal goes through smoothly, and it's only the tough cases that matter, and you know, the whole world needs to be better at dealing with the people that don't quite fit into the nice categories.
That's right. Well, we're running out of time, as you see, and thank you again for your time. And
thank you for the invitation.
Okay, thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.